They called it a pipe dream.
She called me a dreamer. Said I lacked killer instinct.
But some dreams are forged in fire.
I remember those early days in my Seattle apartment, the constant hum of my server rack a lullaby, the scent of stale coffee and ambition thick in the air. I was 35, and every fiber of my being was poured into Solstice AI, a startup I truly believed would change the world. Predictive analytics for renewable energy, it wasn't just code to me. It was a mission, a tangible way to make a difference in a world grappling with climate change. My cramped space, overflowing with whiteboards scribbled with algorithms and diagrams, lit by the relentless glow of 3 monitors, felt like the command center of my future. I'd work 18-hour days, often losing track of time, fueled by cheap ramen, instant coffee, and the sheer, intoxicating thrill of building something from nothing. My fingers would ache, my eyes would burn, but the satisfaction of seeing lines of code translate into a functioning model was a high unlike any other. Brooke, my fiancée at the time, was a force of nature in her own right. Charismatic, sharp, a marketing executive who could charm anyone into anything. In the beginning, she saw the spark, the raw potential. She'd bring me takeout on those impossibly long nights, her perfume a welcome contrast to the metallic tang of electronics, and she'd actually listen to my passionate ramblings about neural networks and energy grids. Her smile could light up a room, and for a while, it felt like she was genuinely proud of my relentless, almost obsessive pursuit. She'd talk about our future in a way that made me believe she was truly invested, not just in me, but in us, in this shared dream. But as the months bled into years, and the investment capital remained stubbornly elusive, that initial glow started to dim. Her visits became less frequent, her voice on the phone growing tighter, her questions about my progress laced with a new, sharper edge. "What's the timeline, Alex? Are you sure this isn't just a pipe dream?" She'd look around my apartment, her designer clothes feeling strangely out of place amidst my programmer clutter, a subtle disdain in her eyes as she contrasted my frugal existence with the polished lives of her colleagues. I was still driving my beat-up Civic, a relic from my college days, still choosing instant coffee over artisanal blends, still opting for open-source tools instead of expensive licenses. Brooke, on the other hand, was all about brand names, upscale restaurants, and exclusive experiences. Our worlds, once so intertwined by a shared vision of our future, began to diverge, a chasm slowly widening between the lines of my intricate code and the glossy pages of her aspirational lifestyle magazines. I tried to explain the complexities, the breakthroughs, the sheer intellectual beauty of what I was creating. I told her it was a marathon, not a sprint, that true innovation took time, that we were on the cusp of something revolutionary. But she just saw the immediate, tangible returns, the lack of a 6-figure salary, the absence of a luxurious apartment. Her patience, once a seemingly endless wellspring, had become a trickling stream, constantly threatening to dry up. There were nights I'd hear her on the phone, her voice hushed, talking about stability and making smart choices, the words hanging in the air like unspoken accusations directed at my life. I tried to ignore the knot tightening in my stomach, telling myself it was just the stress of the startup, the immense pressure of expectations. But deep down, a quiet dread had begun to bloom, a cold, undeniable awareness that the foundation we stood on was starting to crack, and I was too absorbed in my digital universe to shore it up. The hope I clung to was still there, a fragile ember, but it was now laced with a bitter taste of unspoken fears, a premonition of the storm brewing just beyond my glowing screens. The air in my apartment grew heavy with unspoken tension, thick like the gray Seattle fog that often pressed against my windows. Brooke's visits became less about shared moments and more about thinly veiled ultimatums, her presence radiating a restless dissatisfaction. She'd talk about her friends, their husbands, their rapidly ascending careers, their beautiful homes in the hills overlooking the city. Each story was a subtle jab, a meticulously placed reminder of what I wasn't providing, what I hadn't achieved. Her impatience manifested in sharp sighs, in the way she'd drum her perfectly manicured fingers on my desk, her gaze sweeping over my humble setup with unconcealed disappointment. as if my worn ergonomic chair and secondhand coffee maker were personal affronts. I could feel her slipping away, a cold certainty settling in my chest like a block of ice. But I was so deep in the trenches of my work, so utterly convinced that success was just around the corner, that I clung desperately to the hope of proving her wrong. I just needed a little more time, a little more funding, one more breakthrough, and then she'd see. The conversation that finally broke us wasn't a shouting match, but something far colder, far more surgical. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of perpetually overcast Seattle day that seemed to mirror the mood inside my soul. She sat across from me, not on the sofa where we used to cuddle, but on the edge of a hard kitchen chair, her posture stiff and unyielding, a barrier between us. She spoke in a calm, almost clinical tone, saying she couldn't do it anymore, that she deserved more than a promise in a cramped apartment. She'd met someone, she told me, a venture capitalist, someone who understands ambition, Alex, someone who actually has a killer instinct. Her words felt like physical blows, each one echoing the insidious doubts that had begun to creep into my own mind during the lonely hours. She accused me of lacking that instinct, of being too cautious, too focused on the noble idea instead of the profitable reality, of living in a fantasy while she needed a partner in the real world. She packed her bags with a chilling efficiency, her movements precise, emotionless, as if clearing out clutter. I watched her go, a hollow ache where my heart used to be. The silence she left behind a deafening roar in my ears. The click of the door closing wasn't just her exit. It was the final, brutal punctuation mark on a chapter one thought was written in stone, a future I had so painstakingly envisioned. Despair, raw and visceral, consumed me. The apartment, once a sanctuary of innovation, became a tomb of shattered dreams, each dusty corner amplifying the emptiness. I didn't eat, didn't sleep for what felt like an eternity, just sat there, staring at the glowing screens, the intricate lines of code mocking me with their ordered logic while my world descended into utter chaos. Her words, pipe dream, and no killer instinct, replayed on an endless loop in my mind, each repetition a fresh stab, twisting the knife deeper. It wasn't just the profound loss of Brooke, it was the brutal invalidation of everything I had dedicated myself to, every late night, every sacrifice. She had seen my passion, my vision, my very soul, and dismissed it as worthless, a childish fantasy. The pain was immense, a physical ache that settled deep in my bones, a suffocating weight that pressed down on my chest, making every breath an effort. For days, I existed in a thick, gray fog, the vibrant world outside my window a blurry, meaningless canvas. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. A tiny flicker in the suffocating darkness. If she thought I lacked the killer instinct, then I would damn well show her. Not for her, not to win her back. The thought of that now felt like a betrayal to myself. But for me, to prove that my vision wasn't a pipe dream, that my dedication wasn't a folly. I channeled every ounce of that heartbreak, every shard of that despair, every single tear I couldn't shed, into my code. It became my refuge, my therapy, my battlefield. Each line written was a defiant whisper against her accusations, a silent roar of determination. The predictive analytics for renewable energy, once a passion, now became a vessel for my silent vengeance, a monument to my unbreakable resilience. The sorrow was still there, a constant, dull companion, but it was now tempered by a fierce, burning resolve, a cold fire that ignited deep within my core. I was broken, yes, but I was not defeated. I would build. I would survive. The next 3 years were a blur of relentless effort, a self-imposed exile from everything but my work. My apartment, once a shared space, became a true monk's cell, barren of distractions, filled only with the rhythmic hum of machines and the singular, unwavering focus of my mind. I cut off most social contact, ignored calls from concerned friends who eventually stopped trying, and lived on a Spartan diet of caffeine, instant noodles, and raw ambition. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, often catching a few fitful hours slumped over my keyboard, waking with a crick in my neck but a renewed, almost fierce clarity in my mind. The code was my world, an intricate, ever-expanding tapestry of logic and data that I wove thread by painstaking thread, day after day, through countless nights. Each bug fixed, each algorithm optimized, each complex problem untangled, felt like a small, silent victory against the ghost of Brooke's dismissal, a quiet, undeniable affirmation that I was indeed building something real, something tangible, something that mattered. I remember the exact moment the tide began to turn, though it wasn't a grand, cinematic revelation. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible shift. I had been wrestling with a particularly stubborn data model for weeks, feeling the familiar sting of frustration, the gnawing doubt that always threatened to resurface, when suddenly, at 3 a.m. on a particularly rainy Tuesday, the solution clicked into place with an almost audible thunk. The predictive accuracy of Solstice AI jumped by a staggering 15%, a leap that pushed it from promising concept to undeniable breakthrough, from a theoretical marvel to a practical powerhouse. I stared at the glowing numbers on my screen, then at the first streaks of sunrise bleeding through my window, painting the gray sky with hesitant pinks and oranges. A profound sense of calm, an almost spiritual peace, washed over me. It wasn't triumph in the way Brooke would understand it. No champagne, no flashy headlines, no immediate material gain, but a deep, quiet satisfaction that resonated in my very bones. It was the mastery of a complex problem, the irrefutable proof that my pipe dream was, in fact, solid ground. From that moment, things accelerated with a momentum I could barely keep pace with. Word spread like wildfire through the tech community, whispers turning into murmurs, then into excited, breathless conversations. Investors, who had once dismissed my pitch with polite but firm rejections, suddenly came calling, their tone respectful, almost reverent. They saw the robust framework, the meticulously optimized algorithms, the undeniable potential to revolutionize renewable energy grids on a global scale. The landmark investment didn't just materialize out of thin air. It was earned through countless hours of unseen labor, through every sacrifice, every moment of self-doubt overcome and transmuted into resolve. When Solstice AI finally went public, the day was a whirlwind of flashing cameras, relentless media attention, ringing phones, and champagne toasts I barely tasted. I stood on the floor of the stock exchange, the ticker symbol Solstice flashing green, then green again, and felt a strange, almost serene detachment. The numbers on the screen were immense, life-altering, but the most profound change had already happened inside me, a quiet revolution of the soul. I was a millionaire, a tech success story, the kind Brooke had always admired, the kind she had wanted me to be. But the validation didn't come from the surging bank account balance. It came from the quiet confidence that hummed beneath my skin, a deep knowing that I had forged my own path. I had built this, brick by digital brick, line by meticulous line, without her, and ultimately, despite her. The news of my success spread like wildfire, carried on the invisible currents of the internet, reaching every corner, every year. I knew it would reach her. There was a small, wounded part of me, a faint echo of my past self, that still wondered what she would think, what she would say. But the larger, stronger part of me felt a quiet, unshakable resolve. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. It was about proving to myself what I was capable of, and that knowledge was far more valuable than any sum of money. The first message came as a surprise, then a dull throb of recognition, like an old scar suddenly aching in a change of weather. It was a text, simple and seemingly innocuous. Asterisk, heard you're doing amazing things, Alex. Congrats. Asterisk, the smiley face felt like a punch to the gut, a casual, almost flippant attempt to bridge years of silence and profound pain with a facile emoji. Brooke. Of course. My success had become undeniable public knowledge, splashed across the glossy pages of tech journals and shouted from the digital headlines of business magazines. It was inevitable she would find out, inevitable she would resurface, a predictable outcome I had quietly anticipated. My assistant had already warned me about a flurry of emails from unfamiliar addresses, some subtly hinting at past connections, others more brazenly seeking collaboration opportunities or strategic partnerships that felt suspiciously like thinly veiled attempts to get my attention. I didn't respond. I just stared at the text message on my new, sleek phone, remembering the way she used to smile, the genuine warmth that had once been there, before it had been replaced by a calculating chill. It was a strange feeling that washed over me, not anger, not even resentment, but a kind of weary recognition of a pattern, a predictable algorithm of human behavior. A few days later, an email landed in my inbox, longer this time, more personal, dripping with manufactured sentiment. She reminisced about our old apartment, not the cramped, struggling part, but the selective memories of late-night talks, even about the cheap ramen we'd shared, romanticizing the hardship. She talked about missed connections and destiny, suggesting that perhaps the universe had simply needed us to grow separately, to find ourselves, before inevitably bringing us back together. She then subtly segued into her own struggles, her recent divorce from the venture capitalist, the man she'd left me for, her career plateau in a marketing industry she now found unfulfilling, lacking purpose. The subtext was clear, almost painfully so. She was looking for a way back in, not to my heart, but to my life, to my success, hoping to hitch her wagon to my newly ascendant star. My initial reaction was a surge of something cold and clinical, like a diagnostic program running through a familiar error code. I analyzed her words, her timing, her thinly veiled intentions, stripping away the nostalgic veneer. This wasn't the Brooke I had loved, the one who briefly saw the spark in my eyes. This was a different Brooke, one shaped and hardened by the very materialistic world she had accused me of failing to conquer, now seemingly cast aside by it. There was a part of me, a small, almost forgotten echo of that broken man who used to crave her approval, that felt a flicker of curiosity, a whisper of what if. Could she have truly changed? Was there a chance for redemption, for a different, more harmonious ending to our story? My mind played out scenarios, brief, fleeting images of a softened Brooke, a sincere apology. But the new Alex, the one who had built Solstice AI from the absolute ashes of his despair, quickly, firmly silenced that voice. I remembered the exact sting of her words, the casual cruelty of her departure, the brutal invalidation of my dreams echoing in the quiet of my empty apartment. I remembered the crushing loneliness, the relentless grind, the sheer, unyielding effort it had taken to climb out of that abyss, pixel by painful pixel. Her sudden reappearance wasn't destiny. It was pure opportunism, thinly disguised as nostalgia, a calculated move to reclaim what she thought she had abandoned. I deleted the email, then blocked her number, wiping her digital footprint from my life. I had no intention of responding, no desire to revisit a past that had nearly destroyed me. Yet, the subtle invasion of her presence, even through these digital messages, stirred a faint, undeniable unease, a premonition that this wouldn't be the last I heard from her. The whispers of the past were growing louder, threatening to disrupt the hard-won peace I had found. I knew, deep down, that a final confrontation was inevitable, and I braced myself for it, determined not to let her poison the well of my hard-earned future. The Seattle Tech Summit was a vibrant, almost overwhelming whirlwind of energy, a cacophony of innovation and ambition echoing through the vast convention center. I was the keynote speaker, an honor that felt surreal, standing on a stage that felt a million miles away from my old cramped apartment, from the lonely glow of my monitors. The air buzzed with anticipation, cameras flashed like distant lightning, and the immense weight of Solstice AI's success, built brick by digital brick, settled comfortably and confidently on my shoulders. I felt self-possessed, poised, no longer the uncertain engineer but a leader in my field, ready to speak to thousands. Before my speech, I was backstage, in a quiet, carpeted holding area, going over my notes one last time. The familiar adrenaline a controlled hum beneath my skin. My security detail, two unobtrusive but formidable figures, were discreet but ever-present, a necessary accompaniment to my new, very public profile. It was in that hushed moment, just before the stage manager called my name, that she appeared. Brooke, dressed impeccably in a sleek power suit, her hair styled perfectly into a sophisticated cascade. She moved with the same effortless grace and confident stride I remembered from a lifetime ago. But there was a new, almost desperate glint in her eyes, a hunger that hadn't been there before. She managed to bypass the initial layers of security with surprising ease, likely charming her way through the younger interns. And suddenly she was there, standing a mere few feet away, her perfume a familiar, jarring echo from a distant past. My security detail immediately moved to intercept, their faces impassive, but I raised a hand, a silent, almost imperceptible signal. I wanted this. I needed this. Not for revenge, but for closure. She approached, her practiced smile firmly in place, her voice a soft murmur that tried to evoke intimacy, a manufactured warmth. She started with the superficial, how incredibly well I looked, how absolutely amazing Solstice AI was, her words laced with an almost theatrical admiration. Then she launched into it, a carefully constructed narrative, reminiscing about our shared dreams, about how she always knew I had it in me, twisting the painful reality of our past into something palatable, something that neatly fit her current agenda. She subtly suggested that her marketing prowess, her killer instinct, the very phrase she'd used to wound me, could still be an invaluable asset to my company, a missing piece in my burgeoning empire, implying a natural, inevitable reunion of our talents. Her hand reached out, lightly, deliberately touching my arm, a familiar gesture meant to conjure forgotten affection, to bridge the chasm of years with a fleeting physical connection. Her eyes, fixed on mine, were filled with a practiced blend of regret and allure, trying to evoke the old Alex, the one who had yearned so desperately for her approval, the one who would have crumbled under her touch. But that man was gone. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the woman I had loved, but a stranger trying to manipulate a memory, a ghost clutching at the vestiges of a past that no longer held power over me. Her touch felt cold, alien, devoid of any genuine warmth, like a perfectly sculpted mannequin. My gaze was clear, unreadable, devoid of the emotion she so clearly hoped to ignite. I felt nothing, no anger, no pain, no residual longing. Only a profound, liberating clarity, like stepping out of a suffocating fog into crisp, clean air. I took a slow breath, the words forming with an unshakable certainty, each syllable a solid stone laid upon the path of my future. "Brooke," I said, my voice calm, steady, and utterly devoid of warmth. "The man you loved, the one you called a dreamer with a pipe dream, he died with that pipe dream." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over her, encompassing the vast, unbridgeable gap between who she thought I was and who I had undeniably become. This Alex? He builds futures, not revisits pasts. I then turned my head slightly towards my security detail, my voice firm and authoritative, cutting through the manufactured politeness. "Please ensure Ms. Miller is escorted out." Her practiced smile finally faltered, her face paling, the allure replaced by shock, then a dawning, crushing humiliation that spread across her features like a stain. The game was over. I watched her retreating back, a perfectly tailored silhouette, elegant and brittle, disappearing down the long, carpeted corridor, flanked by my security detail. There was no theatrical exit, no dramatic outburst, just the quiet, almost pathetic dignity of a woman whose carefully constructed facade had just shattered, leaving her exposed. And as I watched her go, something profound, something deeply transformative, happened within me. I felt not anger, not vengeance, and certainly not regret for what might have been. Instead, there was a profound, almost spiritual emptiness. It wasn't the emptiness of despair that had once consumed me, but the clearing of space, the quiet, immense satisfaction of a burden finally, completely lifted. The corrosive weight of her judgment, the lingering shadow of her dismissal, her insidious, pipe dream pronouncements, had finally evaporated into thin air, leaving only clarity. In that singular moment, standing backstage, the murmur of the eager crowd just beyond the curtain, just minutes before addressing thousands, I realized the true measure of my success wasn't the millions in my bank account, or the soaring valuation of Solstice AI, or even the accolades from my peers. It was this mastery over my own emotional landscape, this quiet, unshakable knowledge that my worth was never dependent on her validation, or on anyone's validation, ever again. Her belief in me, I saw clearly now, had been conditional, tied to immediate material gain and conventional societal status. My belief in myself, however, had been forged in the crucible of solitude and despair, tempered by relentless, often painful effort, honed by every doubt I had conquered. That, I understood with a deep, resonant certainty, was the real fortune, the real achievement. Brooke, I learned later through the hushed whispers of the industry, left the conference immediately, her attempts to rekindle a profitable connection having failed spectacularly and publicly. The humiliation, I imagined, was a bitter pill to swallow, a public testament to her misjudgment, a mirror reflecting her own lack of killer instinct when it came to true discernment. But I felt no pleasure in her discomfort, no surge of vindication. Her story was her own now, entirely separate from mine, a distant, irrelevant footnote in a chapter one had already closed, sealed, and archived away. When my name was called, echoing through the vast hall, I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh carpet and anticipation filling my lungs. I walked onto the stage, the bright, almost blinding lights washing over me, the roar of the crowd a distant, encouraging wave. My steps were steady, my posture erect, my mind clear and focused, unburdened by the past. I was a calm, self-possessed leader, no longer haunted by the ghosts of what-ifs, no longer driven by the desperate need to prove anything to anyone, but the man staring back from the mirror each morning. I looked out at the sea of eager faces, at the future stretching before me, full of boundless possibility and profound purpose. I began to speak about Solstice AI, about the transformative power of predictive analytics in renewable energy, about building a better, more sustainable tomorrow for everyone. And as my voice filled the room, steady and strong, imbued with a quiet authority, I knew that I had not just closed the door on my past. I had locked it, thrown away the key, and stepped firmly into a future that was entirely, unequivocally, and beautifully my own. The quiet satisfaction of that knowledge, the profound sense of liberation, was a warmth that settled deep in my chest, a true and lasting healing. It was bittersweet, perhaps, to have journeyed through such pain to reach this peace, but the sweetness of absolute freedom was undeniable, intoxicating.